This is The Meaningful Way. I'm your host, Luke Iorio. You know, to be able to find meaning is something that can be really, really difficult when our minds are constantly chasing the next idea, the interpretations that we get throughout the course of the day, or just plain old chasing the shiny object of whatever it is that's coming up for us in this particular moment. And that's one of the reasons why the growth of mindfulness has just taken off over the course of these last 4, 5, 6 years. There's so many reasons for it. And so today we're going to go deeper again into this topic of mindfulness, and we're going to talk to one of the great experts that's out there, a fantastic book, somebody who could say is not only an expert, but even a geek on the subject. And we're going to talk also about how to deconstruct yourself as part of this process so you can really, truly tap into the essential meaning of who you are and where you want to go in this life. And so with that, I am very pleased to say that our guest today is Michael Taft. Michael Taft is a best-selling author. He's a neuroscience junkie. As a mindfulness coach, he specializes in secular, science-based mindfulness training in groups, corporate settings, and one-on-one sessions. Michael is the author of several books, including The Mindful Geek, as well as Non-Dualism, a brief history of a timeless concept, and Ego, which he co-authored. He's also been the editor of such books as Hardwiring Happiness by Rick Hanson, as well as the upcoming The Science of Enlightenment by Shinzen Young. He has taught at Google and worked on curriculum development for the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute. Michael is also an official advisor to the Therapeutic Neuroscience Lab. He's previously been the editor-in-chief of Being Human, a site for exploring what evolution, neuroscience, biology, psychology, archaeology, and technology can tell us about the human condition, as well as an editorial director of Sounds True. From Zen temples in Japan to yogi caves in India, Michael has been meditating for over 30 years and has extensive experience in both Buddhist and Hindu practice. Michael is a senior facilitator in Shinzen Young's basic mindfulness system and is a teacher at Against the Stream Buddhist Meditation Society. And with that, Michael, I want to thank you so much for joining us here on The Meaningful Way.
Hey, Luke. Thanks for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here.
Appreciate it. And so I guess maybe one of the places to begin, because you've got so many things after 30 years of meditation and diving into this work, the research behind it, the practice, the training, and everything else. That's sort of what I like to refer to as the after picture, right? It's what's going on for you now. And I'd love to give everybody a little bit of the sense of your background of what is it that led you into this work, what led you to the field of mindfulness, let alone what allowed you to achieve the incredible status of being a mindful geek.
The incomprehensibly valuable status as a mindful geek. Yes.
Absolutely.
That started long ago as a teenager in 1970s in Michigan, where I was having just terrible anxiety disorder. And back then, under those conditions, there just wasn't that much available to help. I sort of felt like I was on my own. I mean, and there weren't as many resources available as there are today. Mm-hmm. And so I somehow, I don't even remember, but I had heard of this thing called meditation. It might have just been that it was the 70s, people were talking about that stuff. Sure. I read a lot of books, and I just understood that there was something like this out there, and I knew that it would help with anxiety or help me calm down at least. And so in just that kind of teenage way, I just sort of tried it on my own with no instruction, like, well, let's give this a shot. And it drastically relieved my distress. I mean, I had instant relief and broke the cycle of panic attacks. Mm-hmm. And I was sold. And as someone who kind of is an all or nothing, both feet in kind of person, I just dove in and started practicing meditation and mindfulness all the time. And so here I am now, almost actually like 35 years later, still doing it.
That's interesting. I guess I'm curious about what is it within mindfulness that allows us to be able to break those cycles Because, you bring up anxiety, certainly anxiety and any of the emotions that feed into our stress, fear, anger, things like that. Some of those things are unfortunately just as prevalent today as they ever were. And I believe that certainly is part of this draw that a lot of people have towards mindfulness right now. And I'm just curious, what is it that you have found? How does it, break that cycle and really allow you to put yourself in a very, very different place?
Well, there's two things that were available to me then, Luke, that all these years later still apply. The one thing that I knew at the time, as I mentioned, was that it would calm me down. Just the simple act of breathing slowly and concentrating on the body sensations of breathing and sitting with that with my eyes closed, that just physiologically forces you to relax. So number one, it's not even mindfulness, it's just basic ability to switch from a stressed out overdrive kind of state into a more relaxed, peaceful, open state in just a physiological way. That was something I contacted immediately, and that's still there at the beginning of mindfulness practice, which is usually, for example, concentrating on the body sensations of breathing. Mm-hmm. So number one, you just relax. But number two, and this was something that I don't know how I understood to do this or knew to do this, but even at the time, as a teenager, I thought, the problem is that I'm thinking about everything that I'm going to have to do for the next year. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of things with a lot of uncertainty. And so, here's like 15-year-old me. I just thought, I just need to think about tomorrow. Yeah. And so, or even today, usually this was late at night. So by saying tomorrow, I meant the coming day. Right. Just think about the next 24 hours. And that immediately caused the panic attack to drop. I mean, very quickly, under a minute. Mm-hmm. And I was able to just begin to focus on the present moment. Obviously, the next 24 hours isn't the present moment, but it's much more present moment than the next year. Mm-hmm. And so that ability to relax and just focus on what's salient, what's in your environment right now, what you have to do next, or the next few things, that just breaks that trance of anxiety and stress. And actually, it's so concrete, it just drops you on the floor and you can set out running, or in other words, take action in a meaningful way. So that duo of things, the relaxation and the coming to the present moment, both of those things are still present in mindfulness practice today. They're really important parts of it. And those are the things that I think can just break that cycle for people.
So it's interesting because I want to hear how you answer some of these challenges or so that I've certainly heard along the way. And I will admit that I threw these challenges up for a long time before I started my own meditation practice about 7 or 8 years ago. Was that when I hear that idea of relax and relax into the breathing and things like that, it was thoughts of there's no way I can't sit still. I can't possibly, I can't quiet my mind. I'm going to get bored or I'm going to get too antsy and so it's, the mind just starts throwing all those objections. And I'm just curious for those that are out there that have, those types of thoughts that run through their head of, I could never sit down like that. I could never quiet my mind like that. I'm too busy. What do you say?
Well, these days, instead of being a lone teenager in Michigan, I am in the Bay Area coaching a lot of startup CEOs, some of the most stressed out, busy, freaked out people who are, happen to be brilliant and amazing. And this is the issue, finding the time, being able to settle down and relax, and the belief that you could never do that. But honestly, it doesn't take an hour of relaxation to break the cycle. Even if I can encourage someone to sit and breathe deeply and let go for even a minute, even 3 minutes, every once in a while, that will start to break that cycle because it brings you out of the trance. It brings you out of the kind of mindset you're in about just tomorrow, doing, and drops you into the present moment. And so all the wind goes out of the sails of the anxiety and stress. And even if it's just for a few minutes, it's extremely powerful. And that gives you the basis. That's like the firm ground or the toehold. And from there, we can do a lot more.
That's great. That's absolutely wonderful imagery in terms of the wind out of the sails of anxiety and stress. Because as we break the cycle, as you said, it drops you out of the trance. It creates that space to gain a little bit more of the pause as well as the perspective. And now all of a sudden you don't have to fight the resistance of already being caught up in the cycle that you're in. It creates a wonderful, wonderful environment.
Yes, Luke. So that idea that you can't sit still or that you don't have time, that's already coming from the frantic anxiety trance, right? Those thoughts are coming from that realm. And so when you settle for even a minute, it breaks you out of that trance, and suddenly you find, well, you actually can sit still for 3 minutes.
Yeah.
It's not that hard. And again, then you have the basis to move forward. It's one step at a time.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because, and to the wonderful point you're also making is that just within that 2 to 3 minutes of that mindful and focused breath, you create, it actually ends up being that easy. We may not believe it, but it ends up being that easy to create a new experience. And of course, that new experience now gives you the belief of, okay, well, maybe there's something to this. Maybe this is possible. And it allows you to reframe things pretty quick. I guess
that's right.
Beyond even the objections, something I've heard you talk a bit about and share about with mindfulness and meditation kind of growing in interest and the way that it is right now. There's so many people that are entering this field. And I think what that does is that when something expands on the one side, it's great because it's more accessible and easier for people to jump on, the new pattern of what might help them. And yet at the same time, when there's rapid growth, there's a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings that commonly come up. And I'm curious if you could share and maybe break down a few of those misconceptions or misunderstandings that are out there.
Well, one of them is the one you just mentioned, the fact that people believe they can't sit still or don't have the time. But honestly, you can sit still. Just give it a shot. You just give yourself a minute. You'll be able to do it. Another really, really common one is that you're supposed to clear your mind. You even said it. You're supposed to somehow blank your mind. And that's actually not part of mindfulness meditation.
Yeah.
That's not one of the goals. Often your mind will clear, and that's wonderful. And sometimes your mind is just busy. But the goal of mindfulness is to contact reality. It's to sit in the gnarliness of the present moment. And when you sit in the naked gnarliness of the present moment without fantasizing the future or drifting into the past, but even sitting with your busy mind, something almost magical, alchemical happens where you begin to settle. Yeah. And you can just feel yourself getting more empowered and more concrete and more able to take action because you're not, even with a busy mind, you're not lost in fantasy or lost in memory because you're contacting the present moment. So people often say to me, I had a terrible meditation session. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? And I usually, already know what they mean, but I'll ask, what does that mean? And they say, well, my mind was busy. And, to me, I'm like, well, cool. That's the reality of the present moment. Sit with your busy mind. That doesn't mean get involved in the thinking, which, that's a little trick to learn to not get all caught up in that busy mind. But the naked, gnarly reality of now is that your mind is busy. All right, well, sit with that. Let it be busy. Is that so bad? And once you let go of that imagining that somehow miraculously, even though you're a super high-powered, energetic, effective entrepreneur of some sort or leader of some sort or whatever kind of person you are, and your mind has to be busy and powerful all day, even though you're doing that all day, you have this imagining that you're going to sit down and suddenly your mind's just going to stop. I mean, that's not going to happen.
Right.
Right? You're
Absolutely.
practicing having a powerful mind when you're working all day. So the cure is to understand, number one, that's not even the goal. And number two, just sit with it being busy.
Yeah.
And oddly, do enough of that, and it will start to calm way down.
Yeah.
Paradoxically, that relieves it, and it can begin to relax quite a bit. And in longer sessions, it will actually clear itself.
Well, it's amazing to me because one, I really appreciate the perspective of just becoming. Focusing in on the reality of that gnarly present moment, as it were. And I think what you're talking about with that clarity, at least what I've seen, is that the way in which we're able to acknowledge what is true in that present moment is part of what allows the ability to begin to maybe accept more, or certainly allow some of those thoughts to simply pass, as opposed to fully engaging and entertaining the story that's going on in our mind at that moment. Because I think you said it is not involved, and certainly I've heard it as that ability to watch or observe what the mind is doing.
That's right. And you just want to just let those happen. And in essence, mindfulness is about accepting reality or contacting what's really happening. And so, okay, my mind is busy right now. Just observe that. No problem. If
you go a little further on that, because it's one of the lessons that was taught inside of your book, the Mindful Geek, where you talk about the practice of labeling. And if you could share just a little bit more about that, because I will say that was probably one of the most critical things for me to learn in my practice, was really working on that idea of labeling so that I wouldn't end up getting fully attached to the story that was going on or whatever was racing through my mind.
That's interesting, Luke. So tell me about your labeling experience.
Somehow this just got flipped. For myself, that idea of when there are those thoughts that are racing through your mind or emotions that happen to be coming up, the ability to just simply note when a thought would go through, as opposed to fully describing and going into the language of the thought, to simply say thinking. Or if an emotion came up, to simply say frustration, or something that would just allow me to acknowledge what it is that's coming up without investing myself in the story, the details, the data, or the drama that may have been there. And when I recognized what you were talking about with labeling, I was hoping to go in, to have you and share some of your perspective on that as well, because to me, that was what created that separation for me many years ago.
Labeling is great for doing exactly what you're describing. It's also excellent, by the way, for just engendering simple concentration. So you can use any label you want. The system you described of labeling thoughts as thoughts and emotions as feelings, or even the name of the emotion, like labeling it anger or frustration. However you do it, labeling is wonderful. It helps you to stay concentrated, remembering what you're contacting. And it helps you to acknowledge the thoughts and feelings. When you think about it, Luke, thoughts and feelings are just signals that want to be acknowledged. They're trying to tell you something. And if you keep trying to ignore them, they keep coming back louder and louder. Hey, I got something to tell you, But if you simply label it thought or thinking or emotion, the signal feels like it's been acknowledged. Yeah. The phone doesn't need to ring anymore, and the signal goes away. And so in that labeling, you're, number one, able to let it go. Yeah. And number two, as you've been saying, you're able to get some distance, some what I would call disidentification or diffusion from those thoughts and feelings, so that you understand that they don't have to be your identity. Yeah. They can just be some passing stuff, some passing activity like weather inside you. And that, when you start to get that sense that even if there's a tornado of thoughts and feelings going on, it's just some weather inside you, and the sky, so to speak, inside you is not disturbed at all by that weather. Then you start to get the real sense of the power of the practice, which is a kind of unflappability, even in the midst of having giant thoughts and feelings. Yeah.
That's the image just immediately of this metaphor of being these internal meteorologists because of the weather pattern you just described, right? It's just noticing what are the elements that are coming together, and they just are what they are, and being able to acknowledge that. And I guess the other piece that popped into me, going back to part of what you mentioned before, was in when we have that intention of clearing our mind, and we're going in with that idea, and we obviously don't necessarily get that session. When we try to clear our mind, it's almost as if we're going to try to deny or resist the thoughts as they come up, as opposed to what you just described in the labeling and the acknowledging of them. And obviously one's going to perpetuate the challenge, and one is going to do what you just described, which is to release it.
That's right. And if you go in attempting to suppress or deny or control the thinking, you're just whipping up the weather. Right. You're going to get involved in an inner conflict, and it just gets worse and worse. It's completely self-defeating. I'm sorry.
There was a few elements in what you've brought up, and because I didn't want to lose the chance to bring this back up again. You've mentioned, I think, focus a few times. I've heard concentration mentioned a few times, and I know these are two of the three elements that you talk about being, very relevant and very important parts of the meditation as well as mindfulness practice. So I was hoping you could distinguish those elements of concentration and focus, and the third one being attention.
You're looking for the difference between attention, focus, and concentration?
Yes.
The way I'm using them very loosely in the practice is they're identical. Mm-hmm. All three of them simply mean to pay attention to what you want to for as long as you want to. Mm. I say simply, but give it a shot. Trying to pay attention to what you want to for as long as you want to is an extreme challenge for most people. It's the mind has a mind of its own, and for the average person out there, paying attention on purpose to anything for even a few seconds is hard. And yet one of the most powerful and scientifically proven parts of mindfulness practice is that it cultivates concentration. Concentration can be built. And so you're starting to notice that your attention span gets longer and longer and longer and longer as you practice. And that's not just good for practice, right? That's good for everything in your whole life.
Yeah. It's amazing to me, the ripple effect that what occurs as part of your mindful practice, the ripple effect it has on so many different areas of your life, because you are building up these strengths such as concentration and focus, as well as the ability to relax and calm your mind, as well as release thoughts. There's just so many things that are part of almost like the basic elements, the foundational elements of who we are, which is why it changes so many aspects of our lives and the way in which we show up.
That's exactly right, Luke. It's the lowest level of the pyramid are these things like attention and acceptance and openness and ability to respond. And so as you improve each of those, the ripple effect is enormous throughout the rest of your life. Concentration is good, it'll make you good at work. It will make you better at listening to your partner. But even though in most mindfulness practice in America, concentration is not emphasized that much, right? It's actually a superpower. Yeah. When you get really good at concentration, you don't just get good at your job and good at, connecting with people, although you do get that. You also get ecstasy, because concentration is the core of a flow state. A flow state is based on concentration. So as you get better at being able to pay attention, you can enter flow states much more easily and much more often. And of course, flow states are ecstatic. They feel good. I think what's so fascinating is in the flow state literature, it's always about one person having one activity. They're a concert pianist, and that's how they do their flow state, or they're a soccer star, and that's how they do their flow state, or they're a mountain biker or a skydiver. But with each of those people, they only have one activity they can get into a flow state with. But when you do mindfulness and you become good at getting highly concentrated, you can go into a flow state on any activity. Yeah. And that is amazing. That's a superpower.
I'm so glad you went there, because it's one of the things that has only occasionally come up on this show, but is something I've wanted to talk about further, because the other parts of the research that you're talking about also is the recognition that flow state, flow experiences are one of the aspects of those individuals that say they have an enormously fulfilling, meaningful life. Because when you are that immersed in the different experiences and you soak up that much more what's there, they're more natural, they're more fulfilling because you're actually present to them. And I love then the further connection you made, which is it's not just about the single activity. It's something that can be repeated across your life. So you get into a life flow, as it were.
That's right. Flow state is a magic word that just means highly concentrated. Yeah. There's no other extra component. You just need to get highly concentrated. And I love that you also said that means highly present, because again, that ties it back to mindfulness. But you can have a flow state on washing your face in the sink in the morning if you're concentrated. It doesn't have to be a peak experience at the top of Mount Everest.
Right.
And when you start to contact the little mini flow states in work or in relationship or in whatever, so hanging out in a hot tub, whatever you're doing, again, life takes on a new ecstatic aspect that is just so missing for people.
Absolutely. I'm kind of chuckling to myself only because somebody had said when I was learning some of this, had said, one of those things you're going to notice is that you're actually going to get into one of those type of flow states. And it could be something simple like washing the dishes. And sure enough, that is actually something that I now can connect to. I've had those experiences. It doesn't have to be the big peak experience, as it were. It can be something you experience every day.
Often it's not a peak experience. Just by definition, as you have more of them, it starts to be steady state. But again, that means the overall tenor of your life is going more and more into flow. And once you start to find that, it is very addictive in a positive sense. Concentration breeds more concentration. It wants you to come back. It wants you to get involved in your life. And you'll find that compared to before, you see that you were previously just skating over the surface of experiences in this very, very superficial manner. And that all it takes is contacting the reality of the present moment instead of what you think it should be. Yeah. But contacting what it actually is. And that's the magic formula. You just start to sink into the flow.
So I have a feeling, I have an idea of where this may connect to, but I love hearing with people, especially such as yourself, that have done this work and committed themselves to your professional work as well as obviously your personal work and personal practice the way that you have. I'm always just curious, what is the favorite thing? What's the favorite aspect of what it is that you now do on a day in and day out, week in and week out basis?
My work gives my life the most meaning. It's amazingly fulfilling. I can't express to you the intensity of walking around all day, talking to people, talking to these brilliant CEOs, these brilliant crazy burners. I'm in the Bay Area. It's just a great place. And seeing how close they are to having an awesome life. And there's just a few mind hacks that if they can get in there and actually do it, and do it like every day, they will flip into just an amazing experience of life. It's not that hard. And so, number one, I'm just constantly motivated to just say, hey, do you know? Check this out. Yeah. You have to try this. But once I'm doing that, once I'm working with someone, then being inside their experience, so I even had to ask you your experience. I just love hearing people's experiences. Yeah. And once I'm inside their experience with them, that's like what people get out of a good novel. That's what people get out of a good movie, where you're actually almost becoming another person for a moment and seeing through their eyes and understanding their world and understanding their perspective, and being able to work together from that place is just a kind of ecstasy. It's wonderful. So I love doing that, and I'm so happy that it actually helps people, and that they are stoked about it. So that part of my work is the most meaningful thing that I'm doing right now. I just love that.
And
in terms of my own practice, it's not any different than what I'm describing.
Right.
I've just been doing it for a long time. And so looking at a tree, feeling the feeling of my butt in the chair, hearing your voice in this headset, seeing the shadows of light on the street, just continuously contacting the sensory experience of the present moment. It's an ongoing flow state. It's ongoing engagement and sinking into the juicy nuts and bolts of reality. Very, very, very pleasant.
You know, it's one of the things that I just want to highlight for everybody out there that's listening, because the piece that I also want you to have heard is how close so many people are. It's, you know, we think that it's usually we've got to move mountains and go miles before we have the type of experience that we would call success or fulfillment or whatever it is that is our word for what we're searching for. And yet very often, as you just said, it's a couple of these mind hacks, as it were, that give us these experiences and connect us to that life so much sooner. And of course, then the material stuff and the achievements and everything else, they'll come. And a matter of fact, they'll come a lot easier because of the state of who you've become.
It's right there, Luke. And the amazing thing is you just have to do the hacks consistently.
Yeah.
They're simple and they're basic and they're actually pretty easy. But you have to have you have to prime the pump a little, have a little trust, and do them consistently for a while to start to feel the effects.
So just before we wrap up, I guess, and I sort of heard some of this, but I'd love to just hear, for you, after all the years of both personal practice and then focusing on this professionally, I'm curious what's changed in you the most as a result of doing all this work.
I think, Luke, that coming out of my past and the milieu of Michigan in the 60s, which had a certain flavor to it, I feel like that world was so limited and so about the struggle and so about what we have to overcome. And what's changed the most is I just see possibility everywhere and see such obvious and easy opportunities to help people fulfill their possibilities. It's right there all the time. I feel it in myself. I feel it in the moment. Each moment has, you could get a little mystical here and say each moment has like an infinite number of possibilities radiating out from it. Yeah. But a few of them are amazing possibilities. Right? And so navigating towards that and realizing that it doesn't have to be always about overcoming the struggle, although I know we all have struggles and I'm not denying that, but there can be too much of a focus on that. And instead, what's really changed is this ability to aim for the amazing outcomes and help others aim for the amazing outcomes. And it's like once you get the taste of that, you just can't stop. It's almost like a force of nature that just wants to help. Yeah. And I think in Buddhism, they would say something about compassion there. You just naturally want to reach out, and it's not that you feel others' feelings or you suffer with them. It's that you want to help. Yeah. And that's an amazing aspect, I think, almost of human nature or reality.
So to bring things full circle, normally I'd ask guests here around what is their meaningful way, and I feel like you've already shared some of that with us. So I want to ask this in a slightly different way, I guess, which is that for you at this point of your life and journey, what is it that you believe creates a meaningful life?
I think the most meaningful life is created by contacting reality, the reality of what's going on in you, the reality of what's going on in someone close to you or someone you work with or someone in the world around you, the reality of the community around you, the reality of the animals and the nature around you. contacting that as clearly and in as unfiltered a way as possible will, so that you're not lost in your mental concepts about those, but instead attempting at least to see them for what they are, or feel what's really going on there, or hear what they're saying. That creates its own meaning. That is an entire universe of meaning is available if you just hang out in the directness of present moment awareness.
Excellent. Michael, I want to thank you so much for being here on The Meaningful Way and for sharing all of your the wisdom, the experience, the expertise that you share with your clients to share with the listeners here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Luke, for having me on. It's always a pleasure. These are my favorite questions.
Awesome. For everybody out there listening, a couple of things. Number one, please check out the book, The Mindful Geek. You can also find Michael Taft online at themindfulgeek.com to check out more of his work and all the great things that he is up to. And there really is just, the simplicity of finding that awesome life, to find those mind hacks that lead us there. I just love the sentiment of the infinite possibilities that are present to you, the things that can open up when you connect directly to the present moment and begin to see it, connect to it for what it truly is and what it truly offers you. I hope you'll take a look at that, take a look at some of these practices and some of this work and explore that for yourselves. And so, as always, until next time, continue to enjoy the journey. Thanks for tuning in to The Meaningful Way. If you enjoyed this episode, do me a favor and please subscribe and follow along with all these great guests, their stories and interviews. Also, it helps us a lot if you not only share some of your favorite episodes online, but also provide us feedback. Go into iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever your favorite podcast app happens to be, and rate the show. Provide us some feedback and let us know how it is that we're doing. If you want to learn more about what we're up to, whether it be with the IPEC Coach Training School, the Live, Lead, Play Network, or even just what's evolving with The Meaningful Way, go on and head on over to lukeiorio.com.